What's gaming, gamers? Today I've got a video for you going over one of the most fun and effective builds I've used since the Edge of Fate expansion's release. This build uses the Starfire Protocol Warlock Chestpiece, the Solar subclass, and a few artifact mods to make survival easy and killing enemies even easier. But before I get into the video itself, I've got a few things to say. Skip to the timestamp on screen if you just care about the build. If you're looking for people to play any content in Destiny with, ranging from portal activities and pinnacle farming, all the way to raids, dungeons, and mythic difficulty content, feel free to join the Discord server. We welcome anyone, no matter how new or seasoned you are, and all of us will teach encounters if you don't know something. If you're interested, hop into the Discord server and play some Destiny with us. The link is in the description. Furthermore, if you have any build ideas you'd like to see me cover, or simply have ideas for different guide-style videos you'd like to see me make, let me know in the comments. I'm looking to expand my videos from simply build guides, and I'm open to ideas. I'm also looking to stream on Twitch more often, and I won't just be playing Destiny over there. On top of Destiny, I'll be playing more story-driven games and going for achievements in those games, as I find achievement hunting to be very fun. If that's interesting to you, my Twitch link is in the description. For a final disclaimer before the video starts, I normally like to share specific numbers regarding ability energy, armor stats, etc. However, with all the new changes to abilities, armor stats, and everything else, I don't have very many specific numbers. When I do, I'll share them, but as it stands currently, I won't have many specific numbers. Now for the build itself, I'll start with a prescriptive build guide in case that's what you're looking for. Once I've done that, I'll go into detail about what each element of the build does, why I've chosen them, as well as any alternative options and their pros and cons should there be any. As always, there are video chapters along the timeline as well as timestamps in the description for you to skip to any specific section you'd like more detail on. For the prescriptive build guide, first use the Starfire Protocol exotic chestpiece. For your solar subclass, use the Well of Radiance super, the Phoenix Dive class ability, whichever jump you prefer, the Celestial Fire melee, the Fusion Grenade, the Hellion aspect, the Touch of Flame aspect, Ember of Empyrean, Ember of Mercy, Ember of Resolve, and Ember of Searing. For the Season Reclamation artifact, use the Fever and Chill mod, the Reciprocal Draw mod, the Cauterized Darkness mod, the Elemental Coalescence mod, the Radiant Shrapnel mod, and the Shield Crush mod. For armor stat distribution, I have 35 health, 28 melee, 157 grenade, 57 super, 46 class, and 102 weapons. For armor archetypes, I have 2 grenadier pieces and 3 gunner pieces. For armor set bonuses, I recommend either the 2-piece Bushido set or the 4-piece Collective Psyche set. For the armor's mod setup, on your helmet, run 1 Harmonic Siphon mod and 2 Heavy Ammo Finder mods. On your arms, run 1 Firepower mod and 2 Grenade Font mods. On your chest piece, run 1 Arc, 1 Solar, and 1 Void Resistance mod. On your legs, run 1 Recuperation mod and 2 Solar Weapon Surge mods. On your bond, run 1 Bomber mod and 2 Time Dilation mods. For weapons, in the kinetic slot, use the Tenacious Mastery Stasis Rocket-Assisted Sidearm from the Iron Banner loot pool with the perk combination of Air Trigger and Chill Clip. In the energy slot, use the BXR-55 Battler Solar Pulse Rifle from Dares of Eternity with the perk combination of Demolitionist and Incandescent. In the heavy slot, use the Dragon's Breath Solar Exotic Rocket Launcher. Now to get into the descriptive, translation lengthy, part of the video, I'll start with the Starfire Protocol exotic chestpiece. Starfire Protocol has the exotic perk Fusion Harness, which will firstly grant you a second Fusion Grenade charge. Next, while either radiant or standing in either a Well of Radiance or an Empowering Rift, dealing weapon damage will refund you Fusion Grenade energy every 0.4 seconds, and getting kills by any means will refund you more Fusion Grenade energy. Lastly, getting a kill with your Fusion Grenade will instantly grant you 100% class ability energy, fully recharging it. Starfire Protocol is also a featured exotic this season and will grant you an extra 3% damage resistance to all incoming damage while equipped. Starfire Protocol is fantastic. The Fusion Grenades are a great grenade for dealing damage to adds, majors, elites, and even bosses, and the on-hit and on-kill energy refunds keep your Fusion Grenades charged so often you'll rarely not have one when you need one. Starfire Protocol also fully recharges your class ability on kill, meaning with this build, you'll have your Phoenix Dive off cooldown whenever you need it. And even if it's not charged, all you have to do is get a grenade kill to charge it. Now that you know what Starfire Protocol does, I can get into the subclasses setup, starting with the Well of Radiance super. Well of Radiance will allow you to thrust a solar sword into the ground to project a continuous aura of healing and damage buffing solar light around it for a base of 30 seconds. Upon casting your well, you'll be instantly granted 300 health, any enemies within 8.5 meters of you will have 40 Scorch Stacks applied to them, and you'll summon 3 Orbs of Power for all your allies excluding yourself. While either you or your allies are within the well's aura, you'll be granted 25% increased damage, a 20% resistance to all incoming non-boss damage, a 10% resistance to all incoming boss damage, a full immunity to all stasis effects, healing at a rate of 50 health per second, and access to anti-barrier rounds on all weapons which don't already have an anti-champion effect. Well of Radiance is a fantastic super and will serve as both a panic button and an incredibly helpful damage phase tool for killing bosses. While standing within your well, you're granted Empowered Weapon Damage, which will allow you to recharge your fusion grenades simply by dealing damage and killing enemies with your weapons while within your Well of Radiance. If you wanted, you could use Song of Flame in place of the Well of Radiance. Song of Flame does grant you Radiant for its entire duration, allowing your weapons to still grant fusion grenade energy. Furthermore, Song of Flame allows you to be mobile while using your super, while the Well of Radiance is stationary. However, I personally prefer the Well, as it allows you to use your fusion grenades and your weapons without lowering the duration of your super. Song of Flame's abilities cost super energy to cast, and the super's base duration is already 5 seconds slower than the Well's base duration. Song of Flame can still be the better option for more mobile boss fights or encounters, and can also be more effective when solo, but in my time playing this season, I've found Well of Radiance to be more useful more often. Try them both to see which one suits you better. Next, for your class ability, Phoenix Dive will allow you to slam the ground while in the air, instantly granting you and any ally within 9 meters of you the Cure ×2 buff, which heals you instantly for 120 health. Phoenix Dive also has a shorter base cooldown than either the Healing or Empowering Rifts, with its base cooldown being 55 seconds compared to the Rift's 82-second base cooldown. With the changes to the Starfire Protocol Chestpiece, Empowering Rift is no longer required for this build, as Radiant will effectively take its place as Empowered Damage. Phoenix Dive also allows you to be more mobile during mechanic phases or during encounters, on top of being an instant source of healing instead of a Healing Rift's heal over time effect. Onto your melee ability, the Celestial Fire Melee will allow you to send out a spiral of 3 homing Solar Blasts. Each Solar Blast deals damage to the enemy hit and will apply 10 Scorch Stacks each for a maximum of 30 Scorch applied to any one enemy whom you've hit with all 3 projectiles. Celestial Fire is chosen over the Incinerator Snap despite its longer cooldown simply because of its range. Incinerator Snap has almost no range at all, and that makes it very difficult to apply Scorch Stacks to enemies that aren't right next to you. Celestial Fire does sacrifice Scorch Stacks, but in my opinion makes up for it with its range and versatility. For your grenade ability, the Fusion Grenade will lightly track and then stick to target's hit, exploding once, 1 second after it's stuck to an enemy or surface. The Fusion Grenade will also apply 40 Scorch Stacks to any enemy hit by the grenade's explosion, regardless of their distance from it. The Fusion Grenade is chosen as it's the only grenade that works with Starfire Protocol. No other grenade benefits from Starfire Protocol's grenade generation, nor its refunding of your class ability on kill, so the Fusion Grenade is the only grenade to use. Onto your aspects. Firstly, the Hellion aspect will allow you to cast your class ability to summon a Solar Mortar Buddy that lobs flaming projectiles at enemies for 20 seconds. The Hellion Buddy will lob a projectile once every 1.35 seconds at any enemy within 40 meters of you. Each projectile will deal damage to enemies hit and will apply 30 Scorch Stacks to any enemy hit by the projectile, as well as any enemy within 4 meters of the projectile's impact. Hellion is chosen for 2 reasons. It's both a free source of damage and it's a free source of Scorch Stacks. Both the damage and the Scorch Stacks will help you noticeably in all areas of the game. Bosses will ignite more often, and adds will die to the projectile or to Scorch often without you even shooting them. Furthermore, with Starfire Protocol's refunding of your class ability by simply getting a Fusion Grenade kill, you'll have your Phoenix Dive off cooldown more frequently than the Hellion's 20-second duration, meaning you'll rarely be without the buddy at all. For your second aspect, Touch of Flame will buff a specific subset of the solar grenades. Its buffs to the Fusion Grenade are the most important for this build. Touch of Flame will cause your Fusion Grenade to explode twice. The second explosion occurs half a second after the first and will deal around 6.2% less damage than the first. Touch of Flame is chosen as it effectively turns each one of your fusion grenades into 2 fusion grenades, nearly doubling the damage of each grenade thrown. This makes the grenade much more consistent at killing enemies, in turn increasing the likelihood you'll be refunded your Phoenix Dive ability when you use your fusion grenade on enemies. Furthermore, again, Touch of Flame will effectively double your grenade's DPS against bosses, as each one thrown will explode twice. Onto the fragments. Firstly, Ember of Empyrean will cause any solar weapon or ability final blow to increase the duration of any radiant or restoration buff you have applied to you. Higher tier enemies grant more time to your buffs, however, neither Radiant nor Restoration's timers can exceed 15 seconds. Furthermore, Ember of Empyrean lowers your health stat by 10 points. Ember of Empyrean is chosen to increase the uptime of both your Radiant buff and your Restoration ×1 buff. Radiant is important to have as high an uptime as possible, as it not only enables your Starfire Protocol to regenerate your grenade's energy, but also enables a few artifact mods and is simply a 20% boost to all of your weapon's damage while active. Restoration is less important, but it's still nice to have a constant, passive, uninterruptible heal over time effect applied to you. Second, for fragments, Ember of Mercy will grant you and any allies nearby you the Restoration ×1 buff for 5 seconds upon reviving an ally. Furthermore, Ember of Mercy will grant you Restoration ×1 for 2 seconds upon the collection of any fire sprite, with fire sprites similarly increasing any restoration buff you already have active by 2 seconds. Lastly, Ember of Mercy comes with a 10-point boost to your health stat. Ember of Mercy is chosen as it'll make collecting fire sprites noticeably safer. Fire sprites are incredibly beneficial to this build as they'll grant you grenade energy every time they're collected. Ember of Mercy simply allows you to collect fire sprites that spawn in the more dangerous areas of an arena more safely, as you'll be guaranteed a bit of healing upon their collection. The third fragment to use is Ember of Resolve. Ember of Resolve will simply grant you the Cure ×1 buff instantly upon getting any grenade kill. Cure ×1 grants you 60 health, and all cure effects incur a 1-second cooldown between activations. Ember of Resolve is simply chosen as a survivability fragment and nothing more. Ember of Resolve is basically free healing, and with this build's uptime on the fusion grenade, you'll be able to cure yourself very often. Additionally, Ember of Resolve will let you choose between using your Phoenix Dive or getting a grenade kill to heal yourself, which can be very helpful if your Phoenix Dive isn't charged or if you want to save your Phoenix Dive for a situation wherein you won't be able to get a grenade kill. Fourth and finally for fragments, Ember of Searing will grant you melee energy every time you defeat a scorched target, and will cause a fire sprite to be spawned upon defeating any scorched enemy. The melee energy gained from Ember of Searing differs based on the tier of enemy killed, with higher tier enemies granting more melee energy per kill. Ember of Searing isn't really brought for its melee energy gains, as this build doesn't really use Celestial Fire for anything besides supplemental Scorch application. Instead, Ember of Searing is brought for its generation of fire sprites, the collection of which will grant you grenade ability energy. As almost every enemy you kill will be scorched by either the Hellion aspect, your fusion grenade or melee, or the incandescent weapon perk, you'll be effectively summoning a fire sprite every time it's off cooldown. With the subclasses set up now detailed, I'll get into the artifact mods to run if you're watching this video during the season Reclamation. The first artifact mod to run is Fever and Chill. Fever and Chill will allow you to grant yourself either the Radiant or Frost armor buffs by either getting rapid precision hits or rapid weapon kills with solar or stasis weapons respectively. Radiant's duration will be 10 seconds, with it being increased to 15 seconds if you have Solar's Ember of Solace fragment equipped. Frost armor's duration will be 9 seconds, with it being increased to 13 seconds with Stasis's Whisper of Rhyme fragment equipped. Fever and Chill will be useful for this build for its granting of Radiant, enabling this build to forego the Ember of Torches fragment. That frees up a fragment slot, allowing this build to effectively have 5 fragments. Once you're Radiant, Ember of Empyrean will increase your Radiant's duration as well, meaning you don't have to worry too much about getting precision hits once you've gotten Radiant the first time. The second artifact mod for this build, Reciprocal Draw, will cause 3 rapid non-sidearm weapon kills to grant your equipped sidearms a damage boost that lasts 6 seconds once you've drawn them. Primary ammo sidearms are granted a 35% boost to their damage, and rocket-assisted sidearms are granted a 15% boost to their damage. Reciprocal Draw is really only useful if you're running either the Tanasha's Mastery Stasis Rocket-Assisted Sidearm or the Call Strand Rocket-Assisted Sidearm in your kinetic slot. If you're running a Solar Primary Ammo sidearm, you can run Reciprocal Draw as well, as it'll be a free, albeit short, damage boost if you get rapid special or heavy weapon kills before you draw it. However, if you're not running any sidearms, you don't need to run Reciprocal Draw, as it won't help you. Third, for artifact mods, the Cauterized Darkness mod will cause any non-boss enemy afflicted with a Darkness debuff, which includes Stasis Slow and Freeze, as well as Strand Sever, Suspend, and Unravel, to take 30% increased solar damage. Cauterized Darkness will be incredibly helpful for your overall damage output, as almost all of the damage you deal will be solar. If you're running any Chill Clip weapon, or any Strand weapon with Slice or Tear, you'll be able to apply Darkness debuffs on demand, allowing you to deal 30% increased solar damage to any enemy you want. The fourth artifact mod to run with this build is Elemental Coalescence. Elemental Coalescence will allow you to summon a super element matching elemental pickup after getting between 4 and 9 kills. Any kills count for Elemental Coalescence. Ability and weapon kills both count, and neither your ability nor your weapon kills have to match your super's element for Elemental Coalescence to summon an elemental pickup. Elemental Coalescence is brought simply to increase your fire sprite uptime and nothing more. Elemental Coalescence allows you to defeat non-scorched enemies to summon fire sprites as well, which simply makes summoning fire sprites more consistent overall. The 5th artifact mod for this build, Radiant Shrapnel, will cause any weapon damage dealt to any enemy while radiant, or killing any scorched enemy with a weapon to summon a solar shrapnel. The solar shrapnel is slightly homing and deals damage and applies 20 scorch stacks to enemies hit by the shrapnel. The shrapnel won't always hit the enemy from whom you've summoned it, but it seems to have an easier time with larger enemies and groups of enemies. Lastly, there's a 1-second cooldown between summoning the shrapnel. Radiant Shrapnel will simply increase your overall damage output, both against single targets and groups of enemies. You'll be scorching and igniting enemies significantly more often, which simply increases your effectiveness in combat. 6th and finally for artifact mods, the Shield Crush mod will grant you an increase to your melee's recharge rate and a 50% increase to your powered melee damage while you have either Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or a Void Overshield. Shield Crush will instead grant you an increase to your grenade's recharge rate, as well as a 25% increase to your grenade's damage while you are either amplified or radiant. Shield Crush is simply brought to increase your fusion grenade's damage, as you'll be radiant nearly all the time with this build. It'll also increase the fusion grenade's passive recharge rate, which is beneficial to its uptime in conjunction with all of the active grenade regeneration this build has. If you wanted, you can swap out the Radiant Shrapnel mod for the Elemental Overdrive mod. Elemental Overdrive will grant you a 10% damage boost to all your weapons when you collect a pickup that corresponds with that weapon's damage type. Elemental Overdrive's damage boost stacks with any weapon surge mods you have and lasts for 7 seconds after collecting an elemental pickup. Elemental Overdrive would increase your overall solar weapon damage, especially while you're clearing adds and summoning fire sprites. Elemental Overdrive won't help you during damage phases, which is why I personally run Radiant Shrapnel with this build, but Elemental Overdrive is still a good artifact mod, so use both of them and see which one you like more. With this season's artifact mods now detailed, I'll get into the armor's setup for this build, starting with stat distribution. My armor with this build has me at 35 health, 28 melee, 157 grenade, 57 super, 46 class, and 102 weapons. Firstly, for stats, the health stat will grant you 0.1% flinch resistance up to a maximum of 10% flinch resistance at 100 points, as well as causing the collection of orbs of power to grant you 0.7 health up to a maximum of 70 health per orb at 100 points. While above 100 points, you'll be granted an increase to your overshield's overall health at a rate of 0.2 health per point up to a maximum of 20 health at 200 points, an increase to your overshield's recharge rate at a rate of 0.45% per point up to a maximum of 45% at 200 points, and a decrease to the delay between taking damage and the start of your overshield regeneration by 0.25% per point up to a maximum of 25% at 200 points. Health isn't really all that important with this build, as you'll be healing actively with your grenade kills thanks to Ember of Resolve, your Phoenix Dive, your heal clip weapons if you're running any, and the Bushido armor set's 2-piece bonus, which I will detail more shortly. I'd recommend anywhere between 30 and 50 points in health, that way collecting orbs does heal you a little bit if you need it, but any higher than that feels like a waste of stats to me. I only have 35 health with my armor, and it feels really good for me personally. The second stat, Melee, will lower the base cooldown of your melee at a rate of 0.65% per point up to a maximum of 65% at 100 points, as well as increasing the amount of energy gained by any active source of melee generation. Unfortunately, I don't have specific numbers on the active gains, as my slight testing and threads I've read have led me to believe the in-game's description of 1.9% increase per tier to be false, and I haven't had the time to test further. While above 100 points in the melee stat, you'll be granted a 0.3% increase to all outgoing melee damage per point, up to a maximum of a 30% melee damage increase at 200 points. The melee stat's damage increase works for all powered melees, all unpowered melees, as well as glaive melee attacks. The melee stat's damage increase is also multiplicative. The melee stat is almost entirely negligible for this build, and I wouldn't recommend having any armor with any focused melee stat points. With 5 pieces of new gear all masterworked, you'll be at 25 points for melee, at which point Celestial Fire will have a 141 second base cooldown, and Incinerator Snap will have a 104 second base cooldown. This build doesn't use the melee melee all that often, and its uptime is supplemented by the Ember of Searing Fragment granting melee energy every time you defeat a scorched enemy, so don't bother speccing into melee at all. Third for armor stats is Grenade. The Grenade stat will lower the base cooldown of your grenade ability by 0.65% per point, up to a maximum of 65% at 100 points, as well as increasing the amount of energy gained by any active source of grenade generation. Unfortunately, I don't have specific numbers on the active gains, as my slight testing and threads I've read have led me to believe the in-game description's 1.9% increase per tier to be false, and I haven't had the time to test further. While above 100 points in the grenade stat, you'll be granted 0.65% increased grenade damage per point, up to a maximum of a 65% increase at 200 points. The grenade stat is the most important stat for this build, as it'll increase your fusion grenade's damage output significantly while above 100 points, as well as decreasing its base cooldown and increasing your active grenade energy gains for every point below 100. At or above 100 points of grenade, your fusion grenade's base cooldown will be 36 seconds, and you'll also be gaining grenade energy by dealing weapon damage and getting weapon kills while radiant, as well as collecting fire sprites. I'd recommend having as high of a grenade stat as you can, and if you can't get to 200 points, running grenade font mods in your arms will increase its stat while you have any stacks of armor charge. I have 157 points in the grenade stat, and while paired with the 2 grenade font mods in my arms, any stacks of armor charge increase my grenade stat to 197, which gives my grenades a 63.05% increase to their damage. The fourth stat, Super, will increase the amount of active super energy granted by any source of active super energy gains up to 100 points. While above 100 points in Super, your Super's damage will be increased by 0.45% per point up to a maximum of 45% increased damage at 200 points. For the Well of Radiance and Ward of Dawn Supers, their duration will be increased by 0.33% per point up to a maximum of 33% increased duration at 200 points. Super isn't really a necessary stat to spec into very much, but you'll end up with a few points in it anyways if you're using any Grenadier archetype armor. I wouldn't focus the super stat any more than you have to based on armor archetypes though, as you won't need to spam your super with this build. I have 57 points in super, and personally I feel like that's a decent amount. Fifth for stats is Class. The Class stat will increase your class ability's base regeneration rate per point up to 100 points, and will also increase the amount of active class ability energy you can generate up to 100 points. I don't have specific numbers regarding how much the class ability's regeneration rate and active energy gains are changed. While above 100 points, the Class stat will grant you an overshield for 5 seconds when using a Hunter Dodge or the Titan Thruster ability, or for 10 seconds while using a Warlock Rift or a Titan Barricade. The overshield's health is increased by 0.4 health for every point above 100, with a maximum 40 health overshield when at 200 class stat. The class stat is entirely unimportant for this build, and I wouldn't recommend having any points in it at all if you can avoid it. Starfire Protocol gives you a fixed 100% class ability energy whenever you get a fusion grenade kill, so you'll never be at the mercy of your Phoenix Dive's passive cooldown. I have 46 points in my class stat, which is really too much, and I'd simply aim for the minimum of 25 points with this build. Sixth and finally for stats, the Weapons stat will grant all of your weapons an increase to their handling and reload speed stats per point, up to a maximum 0.9 times handling duration multiplier and a 0.9 times reload duration multiplier at 100 points in the weapon stat. Furthermore, weapon damage dealt to rank and file and elite combatants is increased by 0.15% per point, up to a maximum 15% weapon damage increase at 100 points. While above 100 points in the weapon stat, any ammo bricks summoned are granted a 1% chance to grant increased ammo when collected, up to a maximum 100% chance at 200 points in the weapon stat. Additionally, primary and special ammo weapons are granted a 0.15% damage increase against bosses per point, up to a maximum of 15% at 200 points, and heavy ammo weapons are granted a 0.1% damage increase against bosses per point, up to a maximum of a 10% damage increase at 200 points. Weapons will be an important stat to run with this build, as you'll need to use your weapons frequently to recharge your grenade's energy. You don't really need to get the stat above 100 points, as the grenade stat is more important, but try to get 100 points if you can, as it'll help the overall loop this build has between spamming your fusion grenades and recharging your fusion grenades by getting weapon kills. I have 102 points in my weapons stat, which is right about where I'd recommend having your weapons stat. As far as armor archetype to focus, I recommend going for a combination of the Grenadier archetype and the Gunner archetype. The Grenadier archetype has Grenade as its primary stat and Super as its secondary stat, so try to get around 3 pieces of Grenadier armor. With Tier 1 armor, that'll grant you around 80 to 90 points in the Grenade stat. Having weapons as the third stat is also important for your Grenadier armor, so try to focus that. The Gunner archetype has weapons as its primary stat and Grenade as its secondary stat, so try to get 2 pieces of Gunner armor to supplement your weapons stat. That'll grant you around 50 to 60 points in your weapons stat with Tier 1 armor, and it'll also increase your Grenade stat by around 30 to 35 points. Focus health as the third stat with your Gunner armor, as that'll work to simply grant you more health when you collect Orbs of Power. My armor is a combination of 3 Gunner pieces and 2 Grenadier pieces. For armor sets, I recommend having the 2-piece set of the Bushido armor, acquirable from the pinnacle activities in the portal. This will allow you to heal upon getting a kill shortly after having reloaded or readying a weapon. Other armor sets you can get are the 4-piece set of the Collective Psyche armor, acquirable from the Desert Perpetual raid, and the 2-piece set of the Last Discipline armor, acquirable from the Crucible Ritual playlist. With the armor's stats and set bonuses now detailed, I'll get into the armor's mod setup for this build, starting with the helmet's mods. Firstly, for helmet mods, the Harmonic Siphon mod will cause an Orb of Power to be summoned upon getting 2 rapid solar weapon kills. Harmonic Siphon is simply brought to generate Orbs of Power. You'll be getting solar weapon kills frequently, especially as you'll need to deal damage and get kills with solar weapons to regenerate your fusion grenade. Collecting Orbs of Power will also grant you super energy, armor charge, and health via both the health stat and the recuperation mod in your legs, making their collection important for the build's effectiveness. Second, for helmet mods, the 2 heavy ammo finder mods together will increase the effect of all contributions towards your heavy ammo meter. As this build uses the Dragon's Breath rocket launcher, you'll only be granted 1 rocket every time you collect a brick of heavy ammo. Even though Dragon's Breath is a very ammo efficient weapon, ammo finders will still ensure you're never out of ammo. If you feel like 2 heavy ammo finders is overkill for you, you can instead swap one out for a super font. One super font mod by itself will grant you 20 points to your super stat while you have any stacks of armor charge. Super font is basically a passive increase to your well or your Song of Flames uptime. You'll be generating and collecting Orbs of Power very often with this build, so you'll have armor charge frequently to take advantage of super font's increase to your super stat. For your arms mods, firstly, the Firepower mod on its own will generate an Orb of Power upon getting any grenade kill with a 10-second cooldown between orb generations. Firepower will simply allow your fusion grenades to summon Orbs of Power, which lessens the burden your solar weapons have to generate orbs all by themselves. Having only one Firepower mod equipped does incur a 10-second cooldown between being able to generate orbs, but you'll be generating plenty of orbs with your weapons, and Firepower is more a supplemental mod than it is a sole source of orbs. Next, for your arms mods, the 2 grenade font mods together will grant you 40 points to your grenade stat while you have any stacks of armor charge. The 2 grenade font mods are brought exclusively to increase your grenade's damage even further, so long as you have stacks of armor charge. If your grenade stat is already above 100, the 2 grenade fonts will increase its damage by a further 26%, which is a great boost to your fusion grenade's outgoing damage. If you don't have 9 armor energy in order to use Firepower and 2 grenade font mods, it's your choice whether to use one of each or to forego the Firepower mod. I'd lean towards one of each, but try both of them out to see which one works better for you personally. Onto your chest pieces mods, simply running whatever resistance mods you need for the content you'll be running will suffice. For general content, I usually just run 1 arc, 1 solar, and 1 void resistance mod, but I will change my resistance mods accordingly when I've activated a threat modifier or when I'm playing on a higher difficulty. It's also smart to think of what enemy type you'll be fighting against, as they generally have 1 or 2 main sources of damage, so you can tailor your resistance mods against the enemies in the activity you'll be playing. An example is the Vex. Vex have significant void damage sources such as the Laser Harpies, Major Goblins, Minotaurs, Wyverns, Cyclopses, and Hydras. As that's the case, when going into an activity wherein you'll be fighting Vex, bring 2 void resistances and 1 of a separate damage type. The Vex also have lots of solar damage with normal Harpies, normal Goblins, and Hobgoblin Snipers all dealing solar damage, so I'll use a solar resistance mod as my 3rd resistance mod. For your legs mods, firstly, the Recuperation mod will grant you 15 health instantly upon the collection of any Orb of Power with no cooldown. Recuperation stacks additively with your health stats health per orb, which allows you to have a lower health stat while still getting a good amount of health upon collecting Orbs of Power. Next, the two Solar Weapon Surge mods together will grant your solar weapons a 17% boost to their damage while you have any stacks of armor charge. This is a 70% increase in damage over just having one Solar Weapon Surge mod equipped. The Solar Weapon Surge mods will simply help your solar primary weapon kill enemies more quickly, which is helpful for not only your survivability, but also regenerating your fusion grenade faster. It'll also help your heavy weapon deal more damage, helping you to kill bosses in fewer phases, or simply deal more damage to any enemy you use it against. For your Bonds mods, firstly, the Bomber mod will grant you grenade energy every time you use your class ability. Bomber is simply brought to passively increase your fusion grenade's uptime and nothing more. You'll have your Phoenix Dive charged often as your fusion grenades fully recharge it every time they get a kill, so you'll be able to take advantage of Bomber pretty often in order to be granted a bit of grenade energy. Lastly, for armor mods, the two Time Dilation mods together will cause each stack of decaying armor charge you have to last 80% longer, increasing their duration to 18 seconds from their base of 10 seconds. The two Time Dilations will simply help you to further your armor charge's uptime, allowing you more time between collecting orbs of power while still keeping your armor charge active. Furthermore, having at least one Time Dilation equipped will allow you to keep your armor charge active with grenade kills alone, as the Firepower mod can summon an orb of power via grenade kills once every 10 seconds. With the armor's setup now entirely detailed, I'll get into my recommendations for weapons to use with this build. I'll first go over the kinetic, energy, and heavy slots in order, detailing what weapons I use in those slots specifically, as well as any alternative weapon options there may be. Once I've done that, I'll detail specifically new gear weapons in each slot, including featured exotic choices. These are weapons you'll be able to use with the Avant-Garde modifier active, which seems to be active on the Conquest activities, as well as a selectable modifier in most Portal activities. Lastly, before I get into the weapons, most of the alternative options I'll be providing for legacy weapons are only acquirable from raids and dungeons. I apologize for this. I normally try to avoid recommending too many raid and dungeon weapons, as they can be hard for new, solo, or casual players to acquire. However, especially as far as heavy weapons go, the best ones, and currently most of the only acquirable ones, are available from raids and dungeons. Again, I apologize, I do try to give as many diversely acquirable weapons as I can. In the kinetic slot, I use the Tenacious Mastery Stasis Rocket Assisted Sidearm from the Iron Banner loot pool with the perk combination of Chill Clip and Impulse Amplifier. Tenacious Mastery is a great weapon to run in the kinetic slot. Chill Clip is the important perk to run as it'll synergize with the Cauterized Darkness artifact mod to allow you to deal 30% more solar damage to any darkness debuffed non-boss enemy. Tenacious Mastery simply allows you to apply slow stacks to enemies faster than any other Chill Clip weapon. Air Trigger would also be a better perk than Impulse Amplifier as it would grant you more reserve ammo, but I never got lucky enough to get that roll and Iron Banner doesn't come back until September. You also don't need to use the Chill Clip perk, although it is the easiest one to use. The Slice perk on strand weapons would work as well, but isn't as simple to proc as it requires using your class ability before being able to apply the Sever debuff to enemies. As far as alternative Chill Clip or Slice weapons you can use as a replacement for Tenacious Mastery, there are the Call Strand Rocket Assisted Sidearm from the Pale Heart weapon pool, the Critical Anomaly Stasis Sniper Rifle from the Salvation's Edge raid, the Deliverance Stasis Fusion Rifle from the Vow of the Disciple raid, the Incisor Strand Trace Rifle from the Trials of Osiris weapon pool, although I'm not actually sure if you can still get this weapon, the Lingering Dread Stasis Grenade Launcher from the Duality Dungeon, and the Riptide Stasis Fusion Rifle from the Legacy Crucible weapon pool, focusable at Lord Shaxx in the tower. In the energy slot, I use the BXR-55 Battler Solar Pulse Rifle from Dares of Eternity with the perk combination of Demolitionist and Incandescent. BXR is perfect in the energy slot, as both Demolitionist and Incandescent are amazing perks for the purposes of this build. Demolitionist will grant you grenade energy every single time you get a kill, which is incredibly helpful for regenerating your fusion grenades by simply getting kills. Then, with Incandescent, every enemy you kill will explode and apply 30 Scorch stacks to enemies, or 45 Scorch stacks to enemies when the perk is enhanced. Having enemies scorched will allow you to kill those enemies for the purposes of both the Ember of Empyrean and Ember of Searing fragments, as enemies dying to the Scorch damage or while scorched will extend the durations of your Radiant and Restoration buffs, as well as summoning a Fire Sprite. Furthermore, enemies that have been scorched by the Incandescent weapon perk specifically will proc the Radiant Shrapnel artifact mod, as the Scorch ticks will count as weapon damage. If you don't have the BXR-55 Battler, don't want to use it, or otherwise want other options, any solar weapon with Demolitionist will be your best bet. As far as currently acquirable solar Demolitionist weapons are concerned, there are the Borrowed Time Solar Submachine Gun from the Legacy Gambit weapon pool, focusable at the Drifter in the tower, the Heliocentric QSC Solar Sidearm from the World Drop weapon pool, focusable at Banshee 44 in the tower on a daily rotation, the No Survivors Solar Submachine Gun from the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon, the Nullify Solar Pulse Rifle from the Salvation's Edge raid, the Vision of Confluence Solar Scout Rifle from the Vault of Glass raid, and the Zowli's Bane Solar Hand Cannon from the King's Fall raid. In the heavy slot, I use the Dragon's Breath Solar Exotic Rocket Launcher. Dragon's Breath is a great weapon for the heavy slot as it's a fire and forget style weapon in that you only have to shoot it at the boss once and it'll do the rest for you. This allows you to throw grenades at the boss to your heart's content or to simply deal with adds in the encounter to keep you alive. Dragon's Breath will also reload itself over time, and if you cause ignitions to occur, it'll reload itself faster. This further allows you to fire a Dragon's Breath at a boss, a problematic major or elite, or simply an enemy spawn point, and then instantly swap back to your energy weapon to deal with adds or to simply throw grenades as soon as they're recharged. Dragon's Breath's catalyst is also fantastic. It decreases the amount of time it takes for Dragon's Breath to passively reload itself, as well as causing kills with the weapon to generate fire sprites. However, Dragon's Breath is different than normal fire sprite generation. Kills with the weapon summon fire sprites with no cooldown between their generation, allowing you to summon an incredible amount of fire sprites if you shoot the weapon at an enemy spawn point or a choke point you know enemies will funnel through in an encounter. However, if you don't have Dragon's Breath, don't want to use Dragon's Breath, or otherwise want to use something different, legendary solar heavy replacements include the Apex Predator Solar Rocket Launcher from the Last Wish raid, the Ascendancy Solar Rocket Launcher purchasable from the Monument to Lost Lights in the Tower, the Briar's Contempt Solar Linear Fusion Rifle from the Root of Nightmares raid, the Cataclysmic Solar Linear Fusion Rifle from the Vow of the Disciple raid, the Hezen Vengeance Solar Rocket Launcher from the Vault of Glass raid, and the Marcelian Sea Solar Grenade Launcher focusable at Banshee 44 in the Tower on a daily rotation. With the legacy weapons now detailed, I'll get into new gear and featured exotic recommendations I have for this build. As there aren't many new gear weapons available at the moment, this section will be shorter but will get longer as more weapons are introduced into the new gear system. For your kinetic slot, the best new gear weapon is the Lionfish 4FR Stasis Fusion Rifle, acquirable from Pinnacle Ops activities. Lionfish is effectively a replacement for the Riptide Fusion Rifle from the Legacy Crucible weapon pool, and while I haven't gotten a great roll of it myself yet, the best perk combination for this build, and likely most builds, is Lead from Gold and Chill Clip. Lead from Gold will simply allow you to collect more ammo overall, ensuring you have ammo for the weapon when you need to use it, and Chill Clip, as I've mentioned, makes this build's solar damage much more effective against all non-boss enemies. For your energy slot, unfortunately, none of the newly added solar weapons have Demolitionist as a rollable perk. However, and this is a spoiler for the Solstice event weapons, so skip ahead a little bit if you don't want to hear it. Those of you still here, the Yeartide Apex Solar Submachine Gun from Solstice will be able to roll the Demolitionist and Incandescent perk combination, so that'd probably be your best bet once Solstice comes around. Before then, however, any of the other solar primary ammo weapons will work. Ahab Char, Agape, and Pre-Astyanax 4 are all good solar weapons and can all at least roll incandescent. For your heavy slot, the best weapon is definitely the Outrageous Fortune Solar Grenade Launcher from Pinnacle Ops. Outrageous Fortune can roll with the classic DPS combination of Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch, which is what I'd highly recommend using on it, as rapid-fire frame GLs really need the increased damage from Bait and Switch especially. As far as featured exotics go, there are a few you can use with this build. Kinetic slot featured exotics that would benefit this build include the Ager's Scepter Stasis Trace Rifle and the Navigator Strand Trace Rifle from the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon. Energy slot featured exotics include the Devil's Ruin Solar Sidearm, the Hierarchy of Needs Solar Bow from the Spire of the Watcher dungeon, and the Polaris Lance Scout Rifle. Heavy slot featured exotics include the Finality's Augur Solar Linear Fusion Rifle from the Sundered Doctrine dungeon, and the Whisper of the Worm Solar Sniper Rifle from the Whisper Exotic mission in Pinnacle Ops. This video is already incredibly long, so I won't go into too much detail regarding my recommended playstyle for it. Instead, I'll just overview a general way to play with this build to help the video's length stay as short as possible. Thankfully, the playstyle for this build is incredibly simple. You just want to use your fusion grenades as much as you can. Pairing your grenade use with your Phoenix Dive ensures your Hellion stays active nearly all the time and will help you to stay alive even on harder difficulties. One tip, if you throw your fusion grenade and then use your Phoenix Dive before your grenade explodes, it'll be refunded immediately upon your grenade getting a kill, allowing you to have your Hellion active as well as having your Phoenix Dive available if you need a burst of cure. If you need grenade energy, getting Radiant is easy with the Fever and Chill artifact mod, and while it's active, any solar weapon or ability Final Blow will extend its duration thanks to Ember of Empyrean. While Radiant is active, dealing any weapon damage, including Scorch Ticks from Incandescent or ignitions caused by your Weapon Scorch or Dragon's Breath, will refund grenade energy. For damage phases, it's also really simple. Simply pop your Well of Radiance or your Song of Flame, shoot your Dragon's Breath at the boss, and throw grenades off cooldown to deal as much damage as you can. You can also use this time to clear adds, as Dragon's Breath will deal a decent amount of boss damage on its own. But that's pretty much it for this build. Thank you for watching. If this video was helpful for you, or if you learned something, leaving a like or subscribing is very helpful to me and my channel, and I'd appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, or constructive criticisms, please leave them in the comments section. I read all of them and reply to all that I can. Lastly, if you'd like to join our clan, the Tyrants Seraphs, or simply play some Destiny with us, you can learn more about that by joining our Discord server. The link is in the description. Again, thank you for watching, and have a great day.